Do you also find it difficult to build up a meaningful relationship with your grandchildren at a distance? As a long distance aunt to a 2-year-old in Australia, I wanted to create a solution for the millions of family members who cannot be physically together all the time. This is why I created Peekabond, an app that helps you to connect with young children at a distance. The app works with the following 3 steps. First, we give playful activities suggestions that are based on your child's development stage. These suggestions are science-based and gamified. Secondly, you can create a private family circle. And finally, we'll let you send videos back and forth so you don't have to be live at the same time and save them in one spot for your grandchild to watch. We've got over 120 content suggestions. You can build a love bank for your grandchildren. And if you go to the Cool Grandpa website and look for the affiliate links, sign up for a newsletter with a lot of inspiring content, or you can try the app for free.
The relationship that can exist between a grandparent and a grandchild is unique and powerful. It should be embraced and celebrated in a big way. That's why I created Grandparents Week, a full week celebrating and equipping grandparents with insights shared from world-class experts and thought leaders on becoming a more influential and cherished grandparent. Hi, I'm Aaron Larsen, founder of GrandparentsAcademy.com, the first and only online academy dedicated to helping grandparents grow meaningful relationships and rich legacies with their loved ones from any distance. I'd like to personally invite you to Grandparents Week, starting on National Grandparents Day, Sunday, September 11th through Saturday, September 17th. I'm bringing together experts from all over the world to help you make the most of your special role as a grandparent. You'll hear a variety of interesting topics, including cultivating healthy cooking habits with grandchildren, becoming a fully engaged grandfather, nurturing strong and meaningful relationships from a distance, creating a photo legacy, and more. This is a virtual event, meaning you can watch these interviews and trainings online from the comfort of your home. And best of all, general admission is free. Our way of saying thanks to all grandparents out there for all that you do. Claim your ticket and come celebrate Grandparents Week with us by clicking the link in the show notes at the end of this episode. We hope to see you there.
Aaron Larsen is somebody who has been deeply impacted by the relationship that he's had with his grandparents. Aaron is going to step in and talk to us about how meaningful those relationships were and how it really inspired him to start Grandparents Academy. You've already heard the promo for Grandparents Academy for the full week celebration of grandparents starting September 11th and running through the 17th. And we have a link for that in the show notes, so be sure to check that out. But beyond that, go to grandparentsacademy.com and check out all the good work that Aaron's doing there. So, enough about that. Let's jump into this conversation, learn more about Aaron's awesome grandparents, as well as what really motivated him to start Grandparents Academy. So, without further ado, let's jump into the conversation. Hello, and welcome to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. This is your host, Greg Payne, coming at you from Studio 12. This podcast is about being the best possible grandpa you can be, focusing on what it is to be a grandpa and how we can all share that experience together for our grandchildren. Hi, Aaron. Thank you so much for being on the Cool Grandpa Podcast. I'm really looking forward to meeting with you and discovering more about your grandparents, and then also the Grandparents Academy that you've started. These are some awesome tools that can help grandparents stay connected with grandkids as technology just kind of goes all over the place, right? And it can be overwhelming, but I appreciate you carving out time of your evening.
Well, I'm honored to be here, Greg, and I'm thrilled to share what we're working on with Grandparents Academy, my experience with grandparents, and why I believe they're some of the most important and potentially impactful people that the world needs more of right now, especially our younger generation. So I'm looking forward to sharing.
That's awesome. And I love the whole mission and everything around the Grandparents Academy. And I know that came out of your relationships with your grandparents. Can you take us back and introduce your grandparents and tell us a little bit about their background and your relationship with them?
Sure, I would love to, and I'll try to keep it brief because I've been really blessed with so many different grandparents in my life, and today maybe I'll highlight a few of them as they relate to Grandparents Academy. Growing up, like most kids, my grandpa was really my hero. I call him Grandpa Grace, and Grandpa Grace was a barber with the soul of a poet. He was the type of guy that he cut generations of hair. Families would just keep coming back to him and back to him because he was kind, courteous, and he really cared about the people that were sitting in his chair beyond just the office. When someone in the family would get sick, he would go bring his toolkit over and he would cut their hair at their house. I mean, that's the type of guy he was. And as a grandkid, he made time for us when we visited to go. First, we'd of course get our haircut, and then we'd head over to the movie theater. And I have distinct memories of skipping along the lobby singing Hakuna Matata with my grandpa after watching Lion King. And then we'd go have some ice cream or go to the nickel arcade. And he was just the quintessential cool grandpa, just rounded, fun, but also he taught some important lessons in my life. Well, later on, at around age, around I think it was 11 or 12, Grandpa, unfortunately, he came down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, which is a horrible, horrible, tragic disease. Basically, their muscles basically deteriorate, and you watch as your hero, lays in bed and basically just kind of vanishes before your eyes. And it was a really hard time, just watching that happen. But I remember in some of his final days, he knew what was going to happen. So he decided that he wanted to do something that would live on beyond him. And so he was an early adopter with technology. He got himself a digital camera, which was pretty new at that time. And he got himself a Hotmail email account. And he would take just fun, creative pictures of himself, maybe sometimes like a silhouette, like of a shadow or he had dentures. So sometimes he'd pop his dentures out and, take kind of fun, creative photos. But he would send it to us, as family members via email. And that was one of the, I think, first inspirations when I started to realize that technology can really be a great tool to connect families. And if used intentionally, just like any tool and in a healthy way, you can cultivate meaning relationships from a distance.
Oh, I love that story. And, you're right. It's interesting that we're fortunate enough to live in these times where digital cameras, were around, digital recorders are around, things of that nature, where as precious as a letter is, that letter doesn't change, right? You don't grab a spur of the moment inspiration as you might with a digital camera where you're not worried about, oh, I've got 12 exposures on this roll of film or something along those lines. Digital, I think, allows us to capture the moment, and then if we reflect on it, we don't like it, we can delete it. Or it's a case of we can send it to somebody through email or whatnot, and they can save it. It becomes a part of a treasured family memory and an artifact of that person.
Absolutely. And it's something even to this day. He passed in 2001. I still look at those emails and I still get the same feeling that I got when I was a lot younger. And you're right, it lives on. And I think that's one way, we have so many options now. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people is they say, okay, we're flooded with options, and you get overloaded and you don't really use it intentionally or with a plan. And so just kind of continue the inspiration of Grandparents Academy. I was just graduating college, and I was one of those kids like I grew up thinking I had my own beliefs about success, which I think society really kind of pounded into me, which was you got to get perfect grades, you got to be members of all these extracurricular activities, and you got to excel at them. You got to get the scholarship, and you got to do well in college, and then you got to get the good paying job right out of college, right? So that was my plan and what I lived for. And I did all those things. But in 2008, when I graduated from this private school, I graduated magna cum laude and magna cum jobless, and I ended up living with Grandma Grace, so grandpa's wife there, and it totally was not what I had planned moving in with my 80-year-old grandma.
I'm sure. It's one of those weird things that, going through school, it's always weird as far as when people are graduating, because sometimes you come out and it's a hot job market and you've got these people that have no job experience. They come out of school and they're turning down money that most of us would have been like leaping at, because that's just how the market is. And then unfortunately, sometimes we come out and there's a recession going on. There's no fault of our own or whatever. It's everybody's looking for a job at that point. And so it forces us to be creative with what we do, and also being able to adjust our plans a little bit, and sometimes that adversity on one hand leads to a lot of positivity when you can review it a couple of years down the road.
You're so right, Greg. It was really, I look back at it, it was the best thing that could have ever happened to someone like me with the ambition that I had at that time and didn't know what to do with. And I learned really quickly that there's a big difference between success and significance. And really what I gained out of that relationship with my grandma at the time was, one, I got to know her better, because Grandpa was the cool grandpa, and all us grandkids growing up, we just wanted to hang out with him, and Grandma would make the grilled cheese and give us a soda, and just kind of go back into the background. Never really got to know her on a deeper level. So I got the opportunity to really know her, to understand what she had been through, living through the Great Depression, getting cancer at the age in later 20s, and learning that she couldn't have kids, adopting 4 kids and raising them after that, helping Grandpa through ALS and being his primary caretaker, and all these things. I remember coming back, I ended up landing a job as a campaign manager, and I was way over my head. And I came home one day and blogs had just come out, and I was frustrated because someone was saying this about the candidate, and I didn't know how to, come back at them, because you can say anything on the internet, And I was venting while we were sitting there watching Golden Girls together. And she asked me, why I was so frustrated. And I told her, and she didn't like argue about it or anything. She just started to tell a little bit about her story. And I learned all these things about her background. And I was just like, oh, wow, that gives you perspective. And you realize that, what you're going through, others have been through and more. And then it naturally, through my curiosity, led to me asking her, how do you get through this? And she told me it was her faith. And that was something that was missing in my life at the time. And I started going to church with her. She really planted the seeds of faith in my life. So I'm forever grateful for that. And I taught her how to use Facebook, because Facebook had just come around and really opened up. And she really missed her family, because everyone lived pretty far away from her. So she learned how to use Facebook. And then I taught her to text, made a Word document, and just kind of showed her how to do that. And to this day, she's still on Facebook. She's commenting on all family members' posts. And it is such a joy just to see how she can still connect, even at the age of 93. She's using the platform.
Oh, wow. I wanted to touch on something that you had mentioned, as far as while you were in a tough situation and struggling, how she was sharing her faith, and then it sounded like extended the invitation for you to come and join her at church. And I think that is such a powerful reminder to us that it's examples, and it's talking in a loving way with somebody when you want them to, want them to change. Like, I'm sure she wanted you to join her with that, but if you hadn't, she would have still loved you anyway. But it's a case of grandkids and children, of course, will look at the way that you talk and the way that you walk and share information that's important to you. whether it's church or general philosophy of life, whatever that is. So I just wanted to touch on that, and as a reminder, and what a powerful example that was that you shared with us. So thank you.
Oh, that is so true, and I have to admit that the first couple times she asked me to go, I didn't go. I was hesitant and resistant, but she didn't give up on me, and I think that's the key. Is one, you can't be afraid to ask if you want to make an impact in someone's life and to share, invite them in, but don't be discouraged if it's rejected on the first, second, or third attempt. She never gave up on me, and I'll tell you, that was one of the biggest gifts of my life and in my own faith journey, was just going through that process and realizing, what success according to my faith really looks like. And that meant everything to me.
Yeah, it's such a shift when you add that element and you make that kind of adjustment, because you're right. As a high school kid and somebody that went to college, got an MBA and everything else, it was being pumped up that, hey, you're going to get an MBA, then you're going to get a job in New York or LA. You're going to, be making 170 grand coming out of the bank and all that, out of the start. And it's like, no, not really. Sure, if you went to Columbia or Harvard or Stanford, Michigan, one of these top schools and get recruited, that's a possibility. But for most of us, that's not how it works. It's still a start at the bottom, work your way up kind of thing. And school can help you get a rung or two up the ladder, but it doesn't suddenly take you to a senior vice president level at Morgan Stanley.
Oh yeah, you're so right. And looking back at it, even if I would have been, I would turn down a high paying salary job any day to get back that time that I got to spend with my grandma. It was priceless. And one of the things that I really got out of that, of course, seeds of faith, but also purpose, because I was floundering and I was kind of aimless. I didn't know what my worth was, right? And also before about a year before that, my grandpa, who I call Grandpa Grit, because he was in a honky tonk band. He loved to fish, lives out in the country, just an awesome guy. Worked in the mill. Well, he retired from the mill, and within a couple of years, he had a stroke, and he lost the ability to use about the half the side of his body, and so he could make out certain words. A few of those words I can't repeat on this podcast.
I was going to say, if he worked at a lumber mill, yeah. I can only imagine the words that still made it through.
And apparently it's pretty normal from what speech pathologists say, that there's certain curse words that, because of the consonants, they're just easier to say for when you're in that condition. But anyway, all that aside, I always wanted to get back down to Roseburg to help out. And so I was fortunate enough. I found this position at a local TV station, somehow got the job. Actually, here's what's interesting. So, sometimes you do something in life, you don't know why you're doing it. And then later down the road, you're like, that was a perfect fit. Well, in college, I would skip nutrition class occasionally, and I would go intern and just hang out with some guys, some alumni who owned a video production company. And during that time, I learned how to be on set and produce music videos and all these things and use editing software. I didn't learn that in school. Well, this job opened up in Roseburg to basically do that for the local TV station. And so that was my gateway to come down to Roseburg and to help Granny Grit care for Grandpa, because she was also caring for several horses. She has all sorts of animals at the place. She has a wonderful garden. And then, she had a part-time job too. So she was really, she's tough, but that's a lot for anybody that can handle. So I decided that I wanted to come down and help. So I lived with them, Grandpa Grit and Granny Grit. And during that time, I learned so much. Granny taught me about resilience and gardening, and we'd still make salsa every year together out of her garden, start everything from seed. And, and that's one lesson I'd love to share is, some people ask me, when do you start making the salsa? And I always tell them it's back in January, because as we're getting the beds created, and we're tilling the soil and we're making sure it's we have the nutrients in there, and then we're starting seed, and it's a long process. And really there's so many parallels to gardening in life in that way that, you really got to, a lot of times it takes a lot longer than you think it would. And in a society where we're increasingly expecting instant gratification, it's a hobby, an activity, a way of life that I think counteracts that in a healthy way.
The thing that I love is when you talk to people that either have like a hobby garden or are farmers or do farming on large scale, it's that idea of, it goes back to, there's seasons for all of this stuff. And if you miss a season when it comes to planting and farming, you're really behind at that point and have to shift, because you're right. I mean, just because it may be dark and dreary outside in January, that's the time where you've got to be out there. You have to be adding nutrients. You have to be prepping everything. So by the time spring gets around and you can throw seeds in or seedlings, whatever it is, the ground's all ready to go. All the nutrients are there. Everything's key. And if you miss that and try to do it in the spring, then your planting and everything else is delayed, then harvesting's delayed. And it teaches you a lot more than just how to grow green beans and hot peppers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're so right. Timing is so important. And I would say, even as you bring that over into relationships, and how do we grow meaningful relationships, rich legacies with our loved ones, which is really the mission of Grandparents Academy. One example that I love to share is Grandpa Grit and I both shared a passion for music. And during the time I lived with them, I was so self-conscious, and my self-esteem had taken such a big hit that there was no way I would ever want to play in front of him, play guitar or sing, because I was afraid irrationally that he would give me a sour look or make fun of me or some other thing. It would just crush me. And so I would sneak downstairs and I would play, and then I'd kind of, walk back upstairs, tiptoe upstairs, and then make a beeline back to the spare bedroom while he would be sitting in the living room in the recliner. And one day, it didn't take him long to catch on what I was doing. One day I went down and I kind of crept back up the stairs after playing, and I looked over at him in the chair, and his eyes just locked on mine. And I knew it felt like I'd been caught or something, and I'm just like, what is it, Grandpa? How can I help you with something? And he looked over to the bookshelf and he just kind of pointed at it with his good hand. And I walked over the bookshelf, and there are all these books on there, Grandma's gardening books, and mostly equestrian books, knitting, all these things, except for one book, which is his raggedy blue 3-ring music notebook. So I figured, that's probably what he wanted. And so I said, "Is this it, Grandpa?" And he nodded his head, and then he patted the side of his armchair to have me come sit down. So I walked over there and I sat on the armchair with him. And he opened the book and he just looked at the first song, which was Big Bad Leroy Brown. And he started to hum the lyrics. And then he looked back up to me, and then he'd hum the lyrics again. And that time, it didn't take me too long to realize what he was doing. He wanted me to sing with him. And so we sat there together, a man who essentially lost his voice because of a stroke, who felt most days, he felt like he was kind of worthless in the eyes of society. No matter, we were there to encourage him and support him, but he felt like he couldn't do anything and that he was worthless. And I felt the same way at that time in life. I was still trying to really figure out my purpose. We went through that book together. We went through every song, and we were probably there an hour and a half. And I walked away just so grateful, just praising God, because the man who had lost his voice had helped me rediscover mine.
That's awesome. And that's just a touching story, and something that just absolutely reminds me about why I'm intentional with trying to develop relationships with my grandkids. Even though my grandson's 4, so he's a long ways away from sitting down and doing Jim Croce and I'm hoping some Waylon Jennings was in there, but
There you go.
but you know what I mean. But it's one of those things where talking with grandparents and people becoming grandparents, it's like, hey, this is why we want to build these relationships, because when there's moments like this, if you guys hadn't had a relationship at all, that you would have missed out on that experience, and you would have been lesser for it, and he would have been lesser for it. And what a blessing to have that moment and remember that.
Yeah, that's right. And the thing is, and I think a lot of, I could say grandparents, but mentors of any type. I think the trap that people walk into is we often think that, oh, well that person, they probably hear it enough. They have good parents, they got good teachers, they got that people around them. I'm sure they tell them how valuable they are, how appreciated they are, what their talents are. I'm sure they hear it all the time. So, maybe I don't need to do anything. I don't want to give them a big head or something like that. There's all these excuses, but really, even though I'd heard that pretty much all my life, it was really that moment, that timing when I needed to hear it the most. And he stepped up to the plate, even despite the conditions that he had. He made the intentional effort. And I think that's, if there's any key takeaway, I hope that anyone listening takes away from this, it's that, don't fall into that trap. It's always the right time to tell someone that they matter, that you love them, that they're worthy, that you're there for them. It's always the right time.
I got to ask you, do you still have the songbook?
Yeah, actually, yeah. It's still at Granny's, and I got to see it. We had thought we had lost it for about a year or so, and I was so sad. And then she had found it. But yeah, it is a priceless treasure, and it also inspired me to do a couple things after he passed. He passed about a year after I lived with him, and at that time, to kind of honor his memory, I decided that I would join a rock band. So I found this Craigslist ad for a local classic rock band. I've never done this before, never been like a soloist or anything. Had a few solos here and there in choir, but it wasn't like, I was always really shy about that thing. And so I tried out, I brought my guitar with me. I sang him a song that I wrote actually in memory of my grandpa. And they were like, there wasn't a dry eye in the audition. And I left, and I got the call later from Steve, the drummer, the leader of the band. And he basically said, we want you in our group. So, come on over to the practice on Monday, but you can leave your guitar. So my singing was all right, but I had to work a little bit on my guitar skills, which was fine.
Yeah, that's fine. There's guys that lead bands that aren't the best guitar players, like Roger Daltrey's one, and Steven Tyler's another, and Rod Stewart, I think, even plays guitar every once in a while when Ronnie Woods lets him. But yeah, no, that's awesome.
They gave me a cowbell and a tambourine every once in a while, so it was fine. But and then the other thing that I decided was, I really, by that time, I started to connect the dots, and I really realized that there's something special that can develop between grandparents and their grandkids that I believe is unique to that sort of relationship. And I thought, what could the world look like if more grandparents were equipped, were encouraged, had what they needed to make that sort of impact in the lives of their grandkids? And the idea spawned the idea of Grandparents Academy. I thought, well, let's create a website, because I had those skills. Let's just start putting together different courses, different tutorials for using social media, and also what eventually became what I called the legacy gardening program, which inspired by Grandma was, how do we take the idea of intentionally creating meaningful relationships and rich legacy, break it down into an easy to understand kind of framework and plan, so that grandparents have a plan and can create their own plan and strategy for their grandkids in terms of how to help them uniquely develop their own skills and gifts, which ultimately becomes their living and lasting legacy, beyond them. And so I created the website. I guess it was back in 2010. I've had a couple thousand grandparents have registered and downloaded the materials and benefited from that. And then on the Facebook page, it's grown to 80,000 followers or so over the years. And one day I decided, gosh, it would be really cool if I could just create some posts that grandparents could look at while they're on Facebook and just bring a smile to their face, and something that can just bring that relationship to the top of mind, celebrate grandparenthood, and also serve as a catalyst to connect digitally with their family. So I started to create all these fun posts related to grandkids and grandparenting, and I had a couple that, to my surprise, they just took off, like completely viral. One of them today has been shared 354,000 times, I believe. It's reached 22 million people around the world, and mostly it's grandparents tagging their sons and daughters and saying, this reminds me of Billy or Sally, or the grandkids, and then they start this like dialogue within the post itself. And I thought, how cool is that? Just to be able to create something. Who knows how many smiles that brought to their faces, and how many conversations that it sparked, thousands and thousands. And I was thinking, there's really something to this. There's something where we can use technology for good in a way that brings families together.
We talked about it earlier, as far as with so many different options out there, it can be really overwhelming for people that didn't grow up in let's say, the digital world. I have a friend of mine that says, "Hey, Greg, you and your generation's the last of the analog world. When we grew up, it was still 8-track tapes in the cars and cassette tapes, and then CDs came along when I was in high school, and then everything else afterwards. But for even people older than me, I mean, trying to keep up, people that are jumping on and going, "Hey, everybody, I just got my MySpace account all set up." And then it's like, "Oh, everybody's over on Instagram." And it's like, gosh darn it, now I got to go figure that out. That's what I love about what you've got going on, because you've got the PDFs for Facebook and Instagram, Skype, Pinterest, FaceTime, everything else. So if the grandparents can figure out where the grandkids are, then you've got a resource and an ability to help get that connection going, and to strengthen it, because it's fun. Like you said, you've got people out there that are taking pictures at spring break or whatnot, and then you've got grandparents coming in and going, they could be commenting whatever, but it may be like, "Oh, I remember my time in Pensacola, Florida too. Only thing was, I was in the Navy training to fly airplanes before I went to the Pacific." Or, you know what I mean? Like, it could be whatever it is, but that starts that conversation, because then the grandkid's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. Grandpa was in World War II."
It is so important to be present wherever your grandkids are. And the thing is, I love digital technology because I know it can make a difference. I also love visiting and in person. I think there's no substitute for visiting in person. In fact, for the last, I guess, 12, 13 years since I moved in with Granny Grit, I see her every weekend that I'm in town, and we go out on our, we call it the funny farm. We go out there and we fix electric fences together. We build things, we garden. We're always working on things together and getting out in the dirt, and sometimes some of those things aren't so fun, but it is fun being with her and sharing these experiences. And I think digital technology, in a way, you can definitely have your conversations, and they can be meaningful. In a way, they can serve as catalysts to spark visits that might not have ever happened if you didn't have that conversation in the first place. So I think it leads to more in-person visits. I think it could lead to more analog sort of methods of communication. Sending letters, like getting postcards in the mail. Though it's what's nice about that is not many people do that anymore, and so it makes it even more special, in my opinion. So things like that, where it's looking at all around, how do we engage, how do we connect and engage with the people that we love, and do it in an intentional way that we can help them become who they were meant to be.
I certainly am one that believes that you use technology to augment these other parts of the relationship. Like you said, letter writing, because I think it's still super powerful that grandchildren, when they receive a multi-page letter, sometimes a postcard, but a multi-page letter at graduation from their grandparent that's encouraging, that's inspiring, that's like, hey, look, you got the whole world in front of you, that sort of thing. And I'm here for you and we'll cheer you on. And then, using all of these things so that it enriches that in-person interaction. I keep rambling, but it's great stuff, and it helps empower, because I think sometimes grandparents, certainly as we get older, our networks start shrinking down some, and our connection can shrink down some, especially grandkids move away, kids move away with the grandkids, whatever that is, that technology just allows you to do quick little hits and updates and that sort of thing. I mean, emails, longer form communication. So it's all great stuff to keep and maintain connections. So when you do show up and see the grandkids, and it might have been a year or two, you're not strangers for a day or two while you're getting to know each other again.
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. That is a great point. Yeah, it can help kind of carry the relationship in between in-person visits. Yeah, that's so true. And Greg, I'll tell you, I think I mentioned this a little earlier too, but I believe, my personal opinion is, there's never been a more critical time for grandkids to have their grandparents in their lives acting in an intentional way. I mean, you might think that the kids these days have everything in the world available to them, and they have every opportunity, but I'll tell you, being a millennial and then also knowing a lot of the younger generations, I'm a father now myself. I believe it's a lot more difficult, and there's a lot of pressure on the younger generations that never existed before in past generations, that they have to face. And I think the resources available to them, while there may be plentiful, they may not be the best quality in what they really need in order to thrive. And it takes someone who has perspective, who has resources and maybe even the time to really pour into them on a deeper level to help them get to where they need to be. Because in my opinion, the kids are not okay. Like I would just say that the kids are not okay. There is a ton going on. There are so many new threats to them in the digital and physical worlds. If you ask me, some people criticize like Gen Z and even millennials, and they say, they're just lazy, or, whatever it is. And I'll tell you, I know a lot of ambitious folks in those generations. And frankly, I think there's a lot of kids out there who are just resigned because they don't feel like they have hope, because they wonder if they could ever afford a home these days, or what's the point in working if, they'll never be able to, eventually amass the wealth to, really prosper in some of these ways. So I think the younger generations, we need encouragement, yes, but more than that, we need intentional mentors in our lives who can go deep, who can show us that we can get through this. Grandma Grace went through the Great Depression, went through cancer, all those things. I still think of that when I have a tough day at work. I think it gives me perspective, and that's what we desperately need.
Along with that too, I think one of the privileges of living long enough to become a grandparent or of grandparent age, even if you're not a grandparent, we've got some miles on us, is that we've got a perspective that can help out. When we have 12-year-old grandsons or granddaughters, that are with cyberbullying, with different things going on, we've got some perspective where we can go, hey, you know what? Hold on, live through this. It's going to suck for a couple of days, but you know what? There's always something new that's going to pop up, and you're going to be old news by this time next week. And that's not always the case, but there is that perspective that you get as you get older of the world's not as immediate as young children, teenagers often think it is, right? Spilling a Coke on a dress, all of a sudden the night's ruined and everybody's it's horrible and it's travesty. And then as a parent and a grandparent, you can go, it's not that big of a deal. People spill stuff on themselves all the time. Just, own it, laugh it off. But you are right in terms of, and we talked about it with technology is moving so fast. I don't think as humans and as little ones, we figured it all out yet. We haven't, that's why it's interesting to read articles about how people that are in Silicon Valley don't allow their kids on devices because they know they're part of the engineers that know, hey, when the phone dings, somebody's going to look at it and some of that. So we're figuring it out. And that's why Scoutmasters, Little League coaches, Girl Scout leaders, whoever it is, those mentor relationships are very, very important.
Yeah. And going to that point, I mean, it's, social media is going to be around. It's never going away at this point, I believe. And it comes down to the question, they're going to be interacting with people. Wouldn't you rather it be you than the cyber bully in their class or the online predator who's looking to take advantage, or, the list goes on and on. They're being inundated with content that usually is negative and isn't healthy for them. So what would the world be like if, 1 million intentional grandparents use social media in a way that edified that relationship, that spread positivity, and not only like sharing the posts at Grandparents Academy, but anyone out there who's sharing some positive content that can help, boost that relationship, and let them know that, if they do experience cyberbullying or there's a threat, that they know where to turn, and that they know in that digital space that there's someone there for them as well in the physical world. Right?
Absolutely. It's that person that, where do they get value from? And where do they seek that love and attention and affection? And that's where grandparents, coaches, mentors, whatever, really come into play, because there's definitely parents are there and they're on the front lines. But as kids get older and they're wanting to separate from parents, sometimes these other adults in their lives play a critical role.
Oh, yeah, that's so right too. And I would say, I always say this whenever I talk about my grandparents, because I think it's so important to mention. Personally, my parents, I think the world of my parents. They would give the shirt off their back. They would do anything for us kids, and we were blessed to have the kind of parents that we had in our lives. But the fact of the matter is, nobody can give someone everything, but everybody can give something. And there's something unique and special that everybody can contribute. And in my life, I've had a lot of mentors, each providing different lessons, different perspective, different gifts. I think different seeds that they've sown in my life that have just bloomed. And so I want that. I want that for you. I want that for every family I come across. I want that in their life, because I know it's life-changing, and I think it could be world-changing.
Oh, that's a great intention. Aaron, how can people reach out, find Grandparents Academy, find out, what resources that you're offering? How do we get people over to you and get these great resources in their hands?
Yes. Yeah. So grandparentsacademy.com. You can visit that site. There are free downloads on there in terms of downloadable guides. There is the Facebook page, grandparentsacademy.com, where we have a ton of those positive, inspiring posts that are free to share, of course. And I'll tell you what, Greg, we're working on something pretty big to celebrate Grandparents' Day coming up, and definitely love for you to be a part of it. It's going to be our first ever online summit, and it's going to be free to attend for grandparents. And we're going to have experts like yourself, Greg, and Dr. Carrie Byrne, others who will be on there sharing their wisdom about grandparenting, and kind of looking at the 360-degree grandparent, like everything related to kind of edifying and growing yourself, to be able to pour into your grandkids. Because I really think, as a mentor, you really have to look at yourself first, and you make sure that you're equipped with what you need, that you're living a life that you feel like you have enough energy and time and resources to pour into others. So I think experts who can help with that part of it, the internal part, and then of course the actual relationship between grandparents and grandkids. So that'll kick off on Grandparents Day or the day after, and we'll have more information about that at grandparentsacademy.com.
Okay, perfect. And folks, if you're out, walking the dog at the gym, whatever it is, I'm going to make sure to put all these links into the show notes. So if you miss something, you didn't hear it quite right, go to the website, find this episode, and check the show notes, and I'll have all the links for Grandparents Academy and the Facebook page, all that stuff in there and easily accessible for you. Aaron, is there anything about the relationship with your grandparents that I didn't ask you that you would like to share, or even Grandparents Academy in general that maybe I didn't ask you that you'd really like people to know about?
Oh, well, thanks for asking. I'm grateful just to have the opportunity to share about my grandparents. Those that know me know that I can talk all day about my grandparents and the stories that they've shared, and other grandparents that have told me inspiring stories. I would just leave it with this, that I would just a reminder that everyone has a voice, no matter where you are in life, and you can make a difference if you choose to do so. The tools, the resources are out there, and you can be that person in the life of your grandkids that changes their whole world. And Greg, myself, others are really looking for ways to connect with you and be there for you in any way we can to help you have that kind of relationship.
Folks, you can't do everything by yourself. No one person's Superman, Superwoman. And it's all about networks and support. And so, like Aaron said, anything you guys need, we're available. We're happy to answer questions and support you in your journey the best we possibly can. So, Aaron, as we wrap up, I just really wanted to say thank you again for being on the Cool Grandpa podcast. And I really do appreciate you taking time out to share your stories and the inspiring work that you're doing with Grandparents Academy.
Again, I'm grateful for the opportunity, and thanks for all that you do, Greg.
This was such a fun conversation with Aaron. I really enjoyed learning the impact that his Grandpa Grace had on him. Even though Grandpa Grace was suffering with ALS, he was an early adopter of some of the digital technologies that were coming out, such as, the first Hotmail accounts or digital photography, and using those things to create connections with other family members. I enjoyed hearing how Grandpa Grace helped to inspire Aaron to create products that help grandparents navigate technology to build connection points with their grandchildren. The other part, too, that I really enjoyed listening about was his Grandpa Grit. After the stroke, had helped Aaron rediscover his voice for music and really prompted him to go out and express himself. I thought that was great how music especially can be a connection point between multi-generations. Be sure to go over to Grandparents Academy, check out those awesome resources that Aaron has, and I've got a link for that in the show notes. I've also got a link for Grandparents Week that Aaron is hosting, so you'll also want to sign up for that as well. And then lastly, as a piece of fun entertainment for us, I've got a YouTube clip from Aaron performing Pretty Woman with his band. So be sure to go to the show notes at cool-grandpa.us, check out these show notes, and then click on these links to get signed up for Grandparents Academy, sign up for Grandparents Week, and then enjoy the fun video of Aaron singing Pretty Woman. So until next time, remember to stay cool. Thank you for listening to the Cool Grandpa Podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend. That's the best way you can help us to expand our community, as well as get the news out about how valuable grandpas are in the lives of those kids. If you'd like to leave me a comment or shoot me a potential topic for this podcast, please go to www.cool-grandpa.us cool-grandpa.us. Look for the comments tab, fill it out, hit submit. It's as easy as that. Until next time, remember to stay cool.